Hello, 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 everybody out there in NaNoWriMo land. I am Grant Faulkner, Executive Director of NaNoWriMo. And thank you for writing with us. Thank you for now coming back to revise with us. And just so you know, this is the third revision workshop or workshop in the series of 4 revision workshops. So we've done this is the third webcast, and don't worry if you missed the first 2. They will be on the internet, we hope, forever. But Catherine's going to put the links in chat so you can go back and watch those if you want to. But otherwise, we're super excited to 3 or 4 webcasts with 2 very special guests. And just to introduce them, Christina Stanley and Jessica Brody, they are both wonderful writers who've written actually several novels during NaNoWriMo, and they've published them. So they know the particular challenges of revising a nano novel. And I have known them for a long time. They're both super savvy, smart writers who not only write novels, they write books about how to write novels, and they teach classes, and they even develop software to help writers. And beyond that, they're generous and imaginative and witty and fun and more. So welcome, Jessica and Christina. Thank you for joining us and putting on this great show.
Thank you, Grant.
Yeah. And you know what? Before we get into the nuts and bolts of revision, which is plenty fun, I want to start with this inspiring story that Christina was telling me before we started about a NaNoWriMo writer who used some of the tools and techniques you guys are going to talk about and had an amazing success story.
So let me just show her book. So this is A Comb of Wishes by Lisa Stringfellow. It's a debut novel. It's a middle grade fairy tale, basically. And it was written, Lisa wrote it in NaNoWriMo. So her draft came out of NaNoWriMo. And then she had to figure out what to do. And lucky us, she came to Fictionary and she did her full edit at Fictionary. But since then, so Lisa, it's now published. It's hit #1 on hot new releases. It is an editor's pick on Amazon.com, which is an amazing accomplishment. But to get there, she submitted this book at a conference, won a literary award for it. And part of the prize was a conference out east at West, wrong way, West, the Society for Children's Illustrators and Writers. And there, she got an agent and her book went into a 5 publishing house auction. She got her contract with HarperCollins, and it's a 2-book deal. So she's come back to go through this process with her second book, which really, really, really thrills me because she trusts us enough she's already been successful. So her second book is now in Fictionary. She's doing this revision process before she submits back to HarperCollins. So just want to do a huge shout out to Lisa, this fabulous book.
Yeah.
And super wish her well. And thanks, to Nano for getting her started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that story, Christina. And I just want to add one little anecdote that Lisa is a school teacher, and she wrote that novel alongside her students, which is, I think, the best way to teach NaNoWriMo is to actually be a participant and a writer alongside the people you're teaching. So Thank you for kicking things off with that inspiring story. And more inspiration to come, a different type of inspiration, because you guys have these great, really generous discounts that you're offering NaNoWriMo writers who buy your products and services. And here we go. Jessica put this up here. And I want to say that there's also a revenue share you guys are doing. So for each purchase, you're contributing to NaNoWriMo so that we can keep putting on events like this. So thank you so much. And I'll let you tell some more details.
All right. Yeah, so we'll talk about this a little bit later as well, but we're both offering 50% off your first 3 months for the Writing Mastery Academy, which is my online writing school that comes with, we now have 10 online courses, writing courses, including the official Save the Cat novel writing course. So I'm the author of Save the Cat Writes a Novel, so I created a course for that, and the complete novel revision course, some of which we're going to talk about today. I've taken some strategies from that and put it into this presentation. And Christina, do you want to talk just a little bit about Fictionary before we get started?
Yeah, so the reason we're here together is because Jessica's Writing Mastery Academy teaches you all of the theory you need to know when you're using Fictionary. And so Fictionary is the tool to apply all of that great knowledge. And so we're offering the same 50% off your 3-month subscription. and or $70 off an annual subscription if you like to work that way. We give a 2-week free trial, so you can import a novel. You can try it to your heart's content, go through Jessica's process and see if it's for you before there's any risk at all.
And the best part is 30% of all the proceeds go back to support NaNoWriMo, so more writers like you can go through this process as well.
Yep.
Thank you so much, because your story matters. We're here to help support that story and help you write it the best we can through workshops like this. So I'm going to turn it over. Oh, wait, before I turn it over to you guys, I do want to tell everyone to please put your questions in chat, because there will be a segment where we will try to get as many of your questions answered by Jessica and Christine as possible. So that'll come in about 30 minutes or so. So take it away.
All right. Okay, so I'm just going to get this back on the screen. We are excited that you're back. Can you see my screen, Christina?
Yes, got it.
Okay,
You're good.
We're good. Thank you. We're excited that you're back. If you're new, that's great. We have some tips that will definitely help you now, and we'll show you how to get started if you've missed the first two. But today we're going to be talking about the scene level revision. So this is also called the detailed edit. Let's dive right into what we're going to talk about today. If you missed the last workshops, be sure to watch those replays on YouTube when you have a chance. The links are in the description. I think they're also being put in the chat. And part 1 and 2 cover important foundation steps that you'll probably want to apply before you apply these steps, although today you'll probably get a lot out of it either way. Okay, remember also that we have this free revision kickstart guide, which is you can find on writingmastery.com/nowwhat. This goes through a lot of the steps that are actually in the first 2 workshops. So if you want a guide to go through the process with you, you can go download that whenever you'd like. Okay, so at this point in the process, if you've been following along with us for these 3 workshops, by now you will have completed a story level revision, ideally. So you've gone through, you've shaped up your structure, you've got your story in a place where you're really feeling good about it. It's best if your story structure is mostly locked into place. We're going to be drilling into individual scenes at this part of the process, and it's really, you'll get the most out of this, the strategies we're going to talk about today, if your structure is mostly locked into place. So you have the general flow of your story down. So I like to say this is where you'll roughly have a finalized scene order. So we don't want to be doing a lot of scene moving around at this point in the process. If you still feel like your scenes need to be moved around a lot, you probably want to back up to the story level and take another pass through the story level to make sure that your scene order is roughly finalized. This can also be called your story map or your storyboard. So you might rearrange a few scenes here and there as you apply the strategies we're going to talk about today, but I think that you're going to get the most out of the scene level revision. You'll be able to focus the best on what you're doing in this part of the process if your story is more finalized. So that's just some few tips. If you're not at this part of the process, if your story is not locked into place yet, don't worry. You can still get a lot out of today's workshop. Just make sure you do go back and do that story level revision to completion and to your own satisfaction before you move on in the process to really get the most out of the scene level revision. Okay. So what we're going to do today, by the end of today, you're going to have a very important understanding of why the scene level revision is so necessary. A lot of authors skip this step. They do the story level revision, they get their structure in place, and then they think that they're done. But we're going to show you why this revision actually is what takes your story to the next level. It's going to really make your story shine and stand out amongst all those other stories out there. So we're going to give you 3 strategies that you can apply today or whenever you're ready that will instantly improve every scene in your novel. If you only do these 3 things, your novel will be better. It will automatically elevate your story. We're also going to show you how to use Fictionary to make scene level revisions easier, to apply these 3 strategies right in Fictionary and help you keep track of them. And most of all, after today, you're going to have confidence that every scene in your novel is as gripping, compelling, and impactful as possible to ensure that readers keep reading to the next scene and the next scene and the next scene. And when you have riveting, compelling scenes one after another, that creates a riveting, compelling story as a whole. Okay, so if you'll remember, this is an overview of the level down revision method that we've been tracking throughout this whole workshop series. We did the story level revision last time, and this time we're going to focus in on that scene level revision, so that middle part that is uber important. As a reminder, we go through this much more detail in our first workshop, but just as a quick reminder, this is the detailed edit. This is a medium level view where we're going to zoom in and revise each scene individually, focusing on things like pacing, structure, and essential scene elements that are going to make your scenes shine. So you have this image here. It's like looking at your story from the airplane window. So we're not seeing the really nitty-gritty details like the trees and the people on the sidewalk, but we are seeing bigger sections of your story as a whole, like you would see from an airplane window. Compared to the story level revision, if you remember, that was like seeing your story from the International Space Station. You're seeing it all at once. Now we're zooming in a little bit more. Okay, before we get into the scene level revision, I'd like to introduce a new revision mindset for you to adopt as you tackle your revisions on each individual scene. This mindset is really going to set you up for success. And I call it a new mindset because it might not be the way that you think of revision before. It might be new to you, or maybe not, but it is an essential mindset for you to adopt. I want you to think of every scene in your story as a mini story that makes up one larger picture. If you think of every scene as a short story that is just as essential as the bigger story, your scenes are going to be better. They're going to be improved. So don't think of this as revising a novel. At this point of the process, we're going to think of it as revising 20, 40, or 60 short stories, or however many scenes are in your novel. We're going to think of each scene as its own short story, and we're going to give it the same amount of attention you would give your novel as a whole. And when we do that, every scene is just going to be elevated, which elevates the story as a whole. So this mindset reminds us that every scene has to be dynamic. If there's a scene in your novel that is not as dynamic as the others, it's automatically going to be the weaker link of the story. So we want to make sure that every scene is dynamic and impactful on its own, so that when we put it all together and we read it in this sequence, we have a non-stop sequence of awesome, dynamic, impactful scenes that make up for a great story. Unfortunately, too many writers, as I said, skip this step. They kind of get their story into place and they give it a quick polish and then they send it off. And they don't really drill into the scene level to make sure that the scenes themselves can stand on their own and can be awesome on their own. So it's important to not skip this step and not say to yourself, well, my structure is strong, so my story is strong. Structure is a really important part, as I firmly believe, I wrote a book about structure, is a really important part. But equally important is to make sure each scene shines as well. So the thing to keep in mind as you do your scene level revision is that your story is only as strong as your weakest scene. So it's a link in a very long chain. And as we know, your chain is only as strong as your weakest link. So think of every scene as chains in your story. And if you find that one weak scene, you're definitely going to want to fix that because it's going to bring your story up as a whole. So let's make every scene as strong as it can be. And today we're going to give you 3 essential elements that will instantly improve your scenes. As I said before, if you apply these 3 elements to your scenes and make sure all of your scenes have these 3 things, then your scenes are going to automatically be better and your story as a whole is going to automatically be better. So here they are as a quick overview, and then we're going to dive further in, and then Christina is going to demo them in Fictionary. So we have an entry and exit hook. We have a goal and a conflict, and we have a scene shift. These are 3 essential elements that all of your scenes need to have in order to kind of pass that checkpoint of this scene is good to go, I can move on. As I said, if you only apply these 3 things, your scenes will improve. So let's take a look. Entry and exit hooks. Basically, you want to ask the question, do my scenes start and end in the right place for maximum reader engagement? Every time you start or end a new scene or chapter, however you're breaking down your story, you give your reader a chance to put the book down. So chapter breaks and scene breaks are cues to the reader that here's a point where I could potentially put the book down. I could take a break. I could go run some errands. That's what chapter breaks are. They are natural breaks for the reader. So every time your reader reaches one, you give them an opportunity to stop reading. Every time they stop reading, you give them an opportunity to not come back. So we want to make sure that we are not letting them put that book down. Entry and exit hooks make it harder and hopefully impossible for your reader to put the book down, even though there are natural breaks in the story. So essentially what entry hooks do is they pull the reader into this scene. It's starting the scene in an engaging place with a hook that's going to go, oh, I have to make the reader go, I have to read this scene. Look at where it starts. I'm instantly pulled in. While exit hooks are where the scene ends, that push the reader into the next scene. I have to read the next scene to find out what happens next. So we're going to give you some tips for a strong entry and exit hook so that you can apply these to each of your scenes. And imagine if every scene starts with something that pulls the reader in and every scene ends with something that pushes the reader to the next scene. Your reader is just going to keep reading on and on and on. No weak scenes. Okay, so tips for creating a strong entry hook. You do want to start in the middle of something, in the middle of an action or a conversation. You can also start with a compelling thought, question, or statement, something that's going to pull the reader in and make them want to know, what is that thought? What's the answer to that question? That statement is really interesting. I have to keep reading and figure out what they mean by that. You can also foreshadow danger or conflict, either external or internal, with an opening hook. What we don't want to do is we don't want to start with long descriptions of the room or the castle or whatever you're describing, or long reflections, also called inner monologue. I'll tell you, when a reader opens the next chapter and goes, oh, I'm just going to read one more chapter, and then they see a big chunk of description of whatever you're describing, that's a cue for them to put it down. Nothing exciting is happening yet, so I'm just going to wait and I'm going to come back later. And they might not come back later. But if you start with something more engaging, like the middle of an action, the middle of a conversation, dropping them right into something that they have to figure out what's happening, that is an interesting opening that hooks them. We also don't want to spend the first part of the scene catching the reader up on what happened between scenes. Maybe you're switching points of view. Maybe time has passed between your scenes. We don't want to start the scene with a whole description of what happened, what did they miss. That again just starts to kind of make their eyes glaze over. It's not entirely exciting. We can do all this, right? We can describe things, we can have inner reflections, we can catch the reader up, but we're going to do that after we hook them. So if you hook them first, get them into the scene, get them moving with the momentum of the next scene, then you can take some time to sprinkle in some reflections, some descriptions, and some catch up on what happened. And we also want to make sure that we're always varying our scene openings. We don't want to always start with the action, always start with dialogue, always start with a thought, or always start with a question. We want to make sure that we are punctuating our story with different types of scene hooks so that we have kind of a feeling of momentum as we go. And I think Christine is going to show us exactly how you can track your scene openings in Fictionary, which is kind of cool. Okay, tips for a strong exit hook. So we talked about an entry hook. How do you push your reader into the next scene every single time? How do you end your scenes with something that makes them go, I have to keep reading? Okay, the key to this is ending with a sense of uncertainty. As soon as you make a scene end with a sense of certainty, you give your reader the opportunity to put the book down. So we want to end with a sense of uncertainty. How do we do that? Well, the easiest way is to use cliffhangers. Now, a lot of people think of cliffhangers as literally stopping in the middle of the action where, a gun is drawn or somebody jumps off the side of a cliff or there's a knock on the door. Those are types of cliffhangers, but actually what I've done in my novel revision course is I've broken down, I can't remember how many, 6 different types of cliffhangers for you to choose from to keep the momentum going and keep everything varied and diverse and lots of different options for you to choose from. So yes, there are the action type of cliffhangers. This is when you literally stop in the middle of an action and the reader has to keep reading to find out what happens next. Unfortunately, if you use too many action cliffhangers in a row, the reader starts to grow a little tired of that. They're like, okay, we get it. You keep dropping us in the middle, and then we have to keep reading. I get it. They start to sense a pattern. So you want to vary it up with different types of cliffhangers. There are also emotional cliffhangers, stopping right before a character would feel some type of emotion, dropping an emotional bomb on your character right at the end. And now the reader wants to find out, how is that going to affect them emotionally, internally? So there's emotional cliffhangers as well. There's also reaction cliffhangers, which is where you have an action and now you want to find out how the character is going to react to that. What are they going to do next in terms of what just happened? So this is also a sense of uncertainty, even though it might not be who's at the door. It might be, let's open the door, see that it's the long lost relative they haven't spoken to, and stop there. Now we want to know how the character is going to react to that. So it's quite a little different than our action cliffhanger. There's also knowledge cliffhangers, which I love to use. This is when you drop a piece of knowledge, information, or insight right at the end of a chapter or a scene. So it's something new that either the reader is learning or the character is learning, or maybe both. So just revealing a new clue, revealing a new insight, revealing a different outlook, revealing anything. Anytime you reveal information or knowledge, you're using a knowledge cliffhanger. And then there's a really unique type of cliffhanger called the foreshadow cliffhanger, which actually only works really if you're writing in third person, or sorry, not third person, you're writing in past tense. And it's when you kind of hint at something that might be to come, like you end a chapter like, that was the last time I would ever say that, because now the next chapter they're going to, do something, or I would soon come to regret this. And now the next chapter, we're going to learn why they would come to regret that. It's usually only something that someone who is looking at past events can narrate organically. Okay, so those are lots of different types of cliffhangers that you can use to end your scene with a sense of uncertainty. The one thing we don't want to do when we end a scene is to wrap everything up with a tidy bow. We want to always leave the reader wanting more with a sense of uncertainty. And once again, just like with our entry hooks, we want to make sure that we're varying our scene endings. So we're not doing all emotional cliffhangers, all action cliffhangers, all knowledge cliffhangers. We are using them in different ways to keep everything interesting and different. Okay, so I know you guys are wanting to see how this looks in a scene, right? Like, what are some examples? Well, here's what Christina and I did. We found a scene that's going to encapsulate all the things we're going to talk about today, the 3 strategies we're going to give you today. We found a scene that is really short that has all of these things. And what's kind of cool about this scene is that it is really short, so that you can see that even these really short, the scene I think is half a page, even these really short half a scene pages can have all the elements of a successful scene. So let's take a look. This is from To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. Now, if you haven't read the book, that's okay. You'll be able to follow along for sure. To All the Boys I've Loved Before I chose because it's not an action, it's not a sci-fi, it's not a heavy plot novel. It has a great plot, but it is more of a contemporary love story. And I wanted to show that all kinds of genres can use these same type of scene strategies to success. So I am going to read along with you pretty quickly so we can get through it, but feel free to come back and read it in more detail if you'd like. I wake up in the middle of the night and Margot's not there. Kitty's curled up on her side next to me, but no Margot. It's pitch dark. Only the moonlight filters through the curtains. I crawl out of bed and move to the window. My breath catches. There they are, Josh and Margot, standing in the driveway. Margot's face is turned away from him toward the moon. Josh is crying. They aren't touching. There's enough space between them for me to know that Margot hasn't changed her mind. I drop the curtain and find my way back to the bed where Kitty has rolled further into the center. I push her back a few inches so there will be room for Margot. I wish I hadn't seen that. It was too personal, too real. It was supposed to be just for them. If there was a way for me to unsee it, I would. I turn on my side and close my eyes. What must it be like to have a boy like you so much he cries for you? And not just any boy, Josh. Our Josh. To answer her question, yes, I think I have been in real love. Just once though, with Josh, our Josh. Okay, so this is a quick little scene from the novel. It's a fantastic novel. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it. So let's take a look. We have an entry hook here. I wake up in the middle of the night and Margot's not there. We have a sense of conflict. Where's Margot? Why isn't she there? This is something different. the author, Jenny Han, has dropped us right into the action here. She doesn't, say I tossed and turned for a while and then I woke up and then I found that that Margot wasn't there. She drops us right in. We also have an exit hook. There is a sense of uncertainty here. We are getting a piece of insight, a piece of knowledge that we didn't have before, which is that she's in love with Josh. And this is a nice emotional cliffhanger here. It's also sort of a knowledge cliffhanger because we're getting a new piece of information that we didn't have. So really short scene, and we have an entry and an exit hook. Christina, I think that you're going to show us this very thing in Fictionary.
Yes, I would love to. So let me just share my screen and we'll go right over to Fictionary. So what we've done here, this is, we're in Fictionary, To All the Boys I'd Loved Before. So what I've done here, instead of importing a whole manuscript, I just did one scene because Jessica and I decided we wanted to keep it really clear what we're trying to share with you so that you can go away and take this knowledge and work on your own story. And also, you could also take all of the story elements and look at this one scene and find them in there. So it's a really great scene for it. So right here, we're on the overview page of Fictionary. And what we did last time when we looked at the structure, we looked at the story arc, the word count per scene, scenes per character, over the whole structure and did that revision process. Now we're going to look at evaluating your scenes. And this is where you'll actually look at the scene by scene level, which is of course what Jessica is talking about. If you're interested in importing a different novel to try it, you can go to my bookshelf and that's the place you do it. And I get asked that question a lot. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So let's have a look at the evaluate page. So on the evaluate page, and I'm sorry this is a bit slow, but Zoom always does this to my computer. And now I'm worried it's actually not moving. There we go. Okay, so that's good. Sorry about the delay there. So here, you can see there's just one scene. Normally you would have a full, your novel would be imported and you would have all your scenes and all your chapters. So here, what we're looking at a plot element and we're looking at the entry and exit hooks. And this is where when you read the scene, you're going to keep track of your entry and exit hooks. Oops, sorry. So if we look at the entry hook, so I just put here, Margot's missing. That's it. That's just the hook. So it gets people reading, as Jessica explained. And here we'll just put in love with Josh, Margot's Josh. So now we know as we go through the novel, we're going to be looking at entry and exit hook for every scene. The other thing I want to point out here is with these elements behind the question marks, you can go and get basic information on the element. You can watch a description of the theory and does my scene start in the right place? And this is linked directly to the writing mastery knowledge that you learn there and how to do it in Fictionary. So we've put together some demos that work between the Writing Mastery Academy and here. And then if you want more information, you can learn about using the element and then writing advice behind it. So for every element as you go, if you forget what we've said, it's here for you. Okay, so we'll go back to Jessica.
Great. Okay, moving on. So the next strategy, then the next essential scene element that we want to talk about today is goals and conflicts. Every scene has to have a goal and a conflict. Goals and conflicts are the engines that drive scenes and keep them interesting. A scene without a goal doesn't really go anywhere. What is the character doing? What's the purpose of the scene? And a scene without a conflict makes the goal too easy and the scene becomes a little bit boring or too easy. So every scene must have a goal and conflict. Goals set up conflicts and conflicts hinder goals. So they really do go together, which is why I like to talk about them together. When you have, like, as I said, when you have a goal without a conflict, it becomes too easy. And so when you create a goal, that's what will inform what kind of conflict to introduce into your scene, because conflicts naturally hinder goals. Okay, so as you're looking at the scenes in your novel, you want to be asking yourself, what is my character actually doing in this scene? Yes, they can be thinking. Yes, they can be reflecting. Yes, you can be describing things. But what is the character of this scene actually doing? What is the purpose of them being in this scene? And what are they trying to accomplish in this scene? You can also ask yourself, what is standing in their way, and or what conflict results from whatever is standing in their way. So conflict can also result from an actual goal. Instead of being in direct opposition to the goal, your character can achieve a goal, and that creates conflict for them. So scene level goals and conflicts, it's important to remember that they're usually smaller in scope than story level goals. Story level goals tend to be bigger, right? They have to last an entire story. What kind of goals is your character going after for pages and pages and chapters and chapters? Scene level goals tend to be smaller. So we don't want to put, these epic world stakes goals into every single scene. That will start to get a little tiresome. So we're just remember that scene level goals can be much smaller. So they can be as simple as waiting in line for a cup of coffee. That's the goal. I need my coffee. And then there's a long line at Starbucks. That's the conflict that's keeping them from getting that coffee. This is a smaller goal. You don't want to spend an entire story with just Starbucks lines and, coffee, wanting coffee, but it's an example of every scene can have a goal, even if it's a small one. And when every scene has a goal, every scene has a purpose, every scene has momentum, and every scene pushes the story forward. I like to think of scene level goals as stepping stones of story level goals. So you have these larger goals that your character's pursuing throughout the story. And we talked about in that in the last webinar, if you want to go back and look at that. Now you can think about, how do those big scene level goals break down into these smaller steps, and those become scene level goals. So here are some examples. Let's look at The Martian by Andy Weir. So we have this big story level goal, which is to get off Mars. That lasts the entire book. He gets off Mars at the end. Sorry, there's a spoiler there. But we have these scene level goals that roll up into that bigger goal. So in order to get off Mars and also survive, he has to, survive for the next I think it's mission to come along. That's the first step that he tries to do. So in order to do that, he has to grow food. He has to make contact with Earth. Then he has to get to the Ares 4 launch site. These are smaller goals, but actually these goals break down into even smaller goals. In order to grow food, he has to figure out how to get soil. He has to figure out how to get water. And there's all these little goals that roll up into this bigger goal. Those smaller goals create scenes in The Martian. That's how it works. You have these bigger goals and you have stepping stones to those goals. Let's look at a fantasy. This is a YA fantasy, Children of Blood and Bone by Tony Anayemi. So the story level goal of this book is to bring back magic to the land of the kingdom of Orisha. That is a big goal. It lasts through the whole story. Now, this goal is broken into smaller goals. In order to achieve this, they have to collect the 3 sacred artifacts that have been, strewn about the countryside. They have to win this sunstone in a battle. They have to escape the king's guards that don't want them to bring back magic. So all of these are broken into smaller goals, and even those things are broken into smaller goals. All of that makes up our scene goals. And of course, the one we've been looking at, To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Here's a contemporary young adult romance where the larger story level goal is to pretend to be in a relationship with Peter to hide her crush on Josh. Well, that's a bigger goal that needs to break down into smaller steps. So we have things like convincing everyone at school that the relationship is real. We have going to the football game together. We have keeping her crush on Josh a secret. And all of those break down into even smaller goals that make up our scenes. So we have scene level goals that contribute to a larger goal. So let's take a look at that scene again and see if we can identify the goal and the conflict that's at play, even in this very short scene. So this is a scene that rolls up into that larger goal of keeping her crush on Josh a secret. So here's where I found the goal being established in the scene. I crawl out of bed and move to the window. She wants to see what's happening. She wants to know why Margot is missing. She wants to find Margot. Later in the scene, she kind of wants to see what's going on outside between Margot and Josh, which is why she continues to watch them. The conflict, however, comes from achieving that goal. She finds Margot outside. She sees her talking to Josh, and it creates all this internal turmoil for her. So conflict can be external or internal. It doesn't always have to be external. So her breath catches, there they are talking, and Josh is crying, and now she wishes she could unsee it. That is an emotional conflict right there that is resulting from her goal. All right, Christina, let's see it in Fictionary. We can't hear you.
I know. Here, it told me, great big screen. So here we're going to use 2 tabs out of the character plot and setting tab. So all of our elements in Fictionary are broken into 3 categories. So there's 38 of them. So in this case, we're going to use the plot tab, which is where the conflict is. Let me just make sure I did that. Nope, that's the goal. Let's not do that. Let's go over here. Sorry. So here we have Laura is the point of view character, and her goal is to spy on Margot and Josh. That's it. And so you just keep track of this here, same as you would for every scene. And then here, just to keep it simple, for conflict, we know it's this whole big area here, but really it's right here where Josh and Margot are standing in the driveway. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to put it in the conflict. So it's enough for me to remember what the conflict in the scene is. So when I'm coming back and revising scenes, or if I'm comparing scenes to see what conflict is happening, and I want to look at, am I reusing the same type of conflict over and over again? Well, that's no good. We want some variety here. This is where I'll put it. So all you want to put here is something that gives you enough information that when you come back quickly and you're revising, you know what it means. Okay, back to you.
Great, thanks. Okay, the final thing we're going to talk about today, and the third thing you should be looking for in all of your scenes, is something called a scene shift. So essentially, every scene must have a shift of some type. What this does is it makes the story feel different after every single scene. When you have a lot of scenes in a row that don't have some type of shift, something that is moving the story along, it tends to make your story feel stagnant. So the story needs to feel somewhat different after the scene is over. And there are a lot of ways to do that, which we're going to talk about. Something has changed because of this scene. So you need to ask yourself with every scene that you review in your manuscript, what has changed because of this? What is different now in the story because of this scene? And when you make sure that you check that box for every single scene, it means that every single scene is serving a purpose in moving the story forward, or maybe moving a character backward if it's about their growth and they're having kind of a push and pull with their growth. But it means that every scene is purposeful. When you find scenes that don't have a shift, or maybe don't have any of the things we've talked about, don't have a goal or a conflict, don't have entry and exit hooks, and don't have a shift, that might be a scene you want to look at and see, is this scene really necessary? Can I remove it if it's not actually making any difference in the story? And if you really want to keep it and you think you can make it work, now you know what you need to do to make that work. So something has to change because of this scene. Without shifts, stories feel stagnant and they feel predictable. The story doesn't have a momentum to it. Okay, so scenes shifts can be small and subtle, or they can be bigger. It really depends on the scene, but we do want to avoid too many big shifts in a row. So big shifts are for more major turning points of the story. Think places, if you're following a scene structure like Save the Cat, there are places like the catalyst, the midpoint, the all is lost. These are major turning points of the story where you might be revealing major things, or major things might be happening. And so you might want a bigger shift in those scenes. But for the most part, most scenes have smaller, more subtle shifts. When you start to kind of throw in these really big shifts in every single scene where the character is realizing something big in every scene, and it can cause what's called plot whiplash, where the reader just feels like they're being whipped about with all these massive shifts. So let's look at a few types of shifts that you could use in your scenes. And if you're finding scenes that are not shifting the story, these are the kinds of things that you might want to add. Okay, so we have shifts in emotion, something that changes internally for your hero. So for example, your hero might go from pessimistic to hopeful by the end of the scene. Maybe they start the scene upbeat and they end the scene dejected. They think they're going to get something in the scene and they don't, and they end a little bit dejected about it. Maybe they go from confident to a little less confident. So these are the way that the character is feeling in the scene. That can shift based on what's happening in the scene. You can also have what's called shift in situation or circumstances. So this is a detail or element about the hero's situation or circumstance that changes. This is usually an external type of shift. So perhaps acquiring an important tool that they need, suddenly their situation has improved, or perhaps losing that tool and suddenly their situation has gotten worse. Maybe a change in the weather, like they wanted to go out, the goal was to go outside and play ball in the park, and it's raining. That is a shift in their situation. It's also a conflict. Or maybe the return of an enemy that would change the situation that they're in. Anything that changes their circumstances can go into this category. We also have shifts in knowledge, similar to a cliffhanger, a knowledge cliffhanger. We can have a shift in knowledge. So this is changes in what the reader or hero understands about the story. So perhaps you're revealing a new clue here, learning a new skill, or gaining some sort of insight as the hero or as the reader, or perhaps both. So if this scene is the purpose is to give the reader or the hero new information, you're probably going to deal with a shift in knowledge. You can also have a shift in goal, where perhaps there's a modification of the goal, or a new goal is introduced, or it's fixing an old goal or modifying an old goal. So perhaps the hero has to try a new angle at something, or they have to determine new steps to their goal because their goal failed in the last scene, things like that. So those are all different types of shifts that you can employ to make sure that your scenes are constantly moving and changing the plot so that your plot doesn't feel stagnant. And I should note that your scene can have multiple shifts in it. You don't have to pick just one. Shorter scenes, like the one we have been studying, tend to have just one shift. So in this scene, the shift that, this scene has two shifts that I identified. That's right. So I identified two shifts. One is a shift in emotion. So when Laura Jean says, I wish I hadn't seen that. It was too personal, too real. It was supposed to be just for them. If there was a way for me to unsee it, I would. She is regretting her goal. She's regretting what she just did in the scene. Remember, these are all tiny. This is a tiny little scene, and all of this is happening. There was a goal, there was a conflict, and the goal actually shifted her whole emotion about what's happening. There's also a shift in knowledge, which comes from that exit hook, which was a knowledge cliffhanger. To answer her question, yes, I think I have been in real love, just once though, with Josh, our Josh. Whoa, suddenly we are getting this piece of knowledge that we didn't have before, that Laura Jean has been in love with her sister's boyfriend. So that is a big shift in knowledge for us. All right, Christina, you're up.
Back to me. Okay. Okay, so we'll look at those two shifts, and again, we're covering two of the sections. So we're going to look at character, and we're going to look at plot. And under character, we've got the impact on point of view. And here, this is her. She feels bad about spying, so this is her emotional shift. On the plot side, we're going to look at reader knowledge gained. And this is where she has been in love. And here, as Jessica said, the reader now knows this. So what I want to show you, so you can see we haven't filled out all of the elements. Some of them are filled out for this scene, but I'd like to take a look at the visualize page. Now the story arc won't draw here because we don't have a story yet. We have one scene in here, so it's looking to see, it says, oops. And this is what happens if you only have one scene and not a full story within Fictionary. And then if you write your story in Fictionary, as it builds, you will then see the story arc appear once there's enough scenes to actually have a story arc. So what I want to show here is the characters in the scene, the point of view goal, the impact on the point of view character, the entry and exit hook, the conflict, and the reader knowledge gained. So these are the things that we looked at for this particular scene to show you what you can do just to make your scene better by looking at only a few of the elements. And what happens when you're working in Fictionary, this will grow. So as you add scenes, you'll get more and more columns, and you can evaluate the scene based on any subset of the story elements that you want to have a look at. So if we look at here, these are the characters that are in the scene. So we've got Josh, Kitty, Laura, and Margot. The point of view is Laura, so that's great, nice and easy. And her goal is to spy on Margot and Josh. And her conflict is, sorry, Josh and Margot standing in the driveway. And so now, when you're looking at every scene together like this, you can see the two things together. And if you wanted to just look at these two, you just select just those two, and you could go across your whole novel looking at just the point of view goal and just the conflict, and see if you have a goal and a conflict in every single scene. And then we've got, sorry.
I was just going to add, if it's missing, right, then we'll be blank there.
Yeah, so you can leave it blank, or you can put none, or you can put weak. And so say you had a goal, but it's kind of weak. It doesn't really relate to the plot. It's not really enticing the reader into the scene. You could do that for any of these. You could just say it's weak, but it's there, or none, it's not there. And then when you evaluate and you look at your revision plan, you can go through and look at, so for example, let's say there was no entry hooks through the entire novel. Right? So then the writer would know, okay, I've got an issue with entry hooks. Maybe first I should go in and really look at what is an entry hook, and look for some great examples in books that I love of how do you do an entry hook, and study it a little bit, and then go back and fix that problem. If it's only occurring once, okay, you missed it and you just go and fix it. It's not that big a deal, but you can use this for your whole revision process of where do you need to go back and look at, maybe it's time to go right back into the Writing Mastery Academy and look at, did I start my scene in the right place? And that section of the course looks at entry hooks and helps you figure out how to do that. And so when you're seeing something occur 3, 4, 5, 6 times, it's time really to back up a little bit, go get your knowledge, and then come back here. And so here I'm showing, the ones we looked at today, but you can do that with all of the story elements. And as you go through the Writing Mastery course, you'll see so many of them link right into Fictionary, which is why Jessica and I hooked up in the first place, because our two offerings work so well together. So yeah, so that's Fictionary on working on a scene.
One thing I wanted to add, Christina, is we did find that our my course and your product work very well together. But now is actually a really great time, if you haven't done so already, to import your manuscript. Once you have a story level revision done, now you can import it and really use some of these scene elements to check your scenes. As we've been talking about, this is a step that a lot of authors skip. So even if you haven't already started using Fictionary, now is actually a really good time to start.
Yeah, and the thing, that what happens to me when I'm writing is, so say, for example, I don't have an exit hook, entry hook, or a point of view goal. It makes me then get really creative, because I go, missing that. How could I fix this scene? What could I do? What happened in the last scene? Well, maybe I could do this, or what is outstanding? What question could be put out there, or what secret, or part of a secret, or something. But it makes me, it triggers in my brain, okay, look at this and figure out different ways. And then I also notice when I'm reading, I'll go, look at this entry hook. That's really good. I'm going to try that technique in my book. Not copy it, but every author uses techniques, and there's nothing wrong with learning from those techniques. Of something that really captures you, then pay attention to it and come back and put it in here. And so for me, this part is really a creative part of the whole writing the novel process and getting it finished is the triggers that get me more excited about writing the scene.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think, and one thing I want to note is, sometimes you have all the stuff in it already. It's just about moving the elements around. Sometimes you might have a great entry hook, but it's halfway down the page because you spent some time doing some description or something. So it's really just about maneuvering elements around in your scenes and rebuilding the scenes to make sure that things are being told in the best order for reader engagement. Okay, so as Christina was showing you, you can use Fictionary to check yourself and check all of your scenes and make sure you have those essential elements. So that is your next step, is to go through your novel scene by scene. Start asking yourself, do my scenes start in the right place? Do they all have entry hooks? That will guarantee that your reader will be pulled into every scene they start. Do my scenes end with a sense of uncertainty? That's the exit hook. Or am I assuring that I'm pushing the reader into the next scene to make sure that they don't want to put the book down? Does every scene have a goal and conflict? Making sure that all those scenes have purpose and keep the momentum of the story going, and that the goals are not achieved too easily. And does every scene have a shift? Is there a difference after the scene that ensures that the scene has meaning and purpose? So analyzing your scenes with these checkpoints and revising scenes that don't check all of these boxes will instantly improve your scenes. As I said, if you only do these things, if you only check for these 4 checkpoints and you revise them into your novel, your scenes will be improved. However,
just before you go on with that, there's different ways to do this in Fictionary. So you can do just your entry hooks or just your exit hooks, or you can do entry and exit hooks together to see what your actual flow of your story is. You can do that in combination with point of view, goal, and conflict, or you can do it separately. So as a writer, you want to find your way that works for you, that don't be constrained by, because we said here are the elements. The order you have to do them in. Sometimes it's easier just to start with the ones you only have a little bit of work just to get things going. So really, I just want to stress, do what works for you as a writer when you're going through this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So those are 4 things that you can check for. Now, there's also 10 more checkpoints that I recommend you check all of your scenes for. Are my scenes described effectively? Does every scene have a purpose? Do my scenes have a solid structure? Do my scenes have tension? Are my scenes balanced and well paced? Are my scenes well researched? Am I switching seamlessly between scenes? Am I switching seamlessly between narrators if I have multiple points of view? Are my scenes told from the right perspective? And are my scenes consistent? So these are the other 10 checkpoints that make up my complete novel revision course at the scene level. And this is why Christina and I got so excited when we met each other, is I have these in my course. She has all of these in story elements in Fictionary. Do you want to just quickly talk about those other elements that you have?
Yeah, of course I do, because it's just too exciting, and we're still not over it that we only met last September and had no idea each of us were working on this separately, just in a different way, right? So when we look at Are My Scenes Described Effectively, under the Setting tab on the Evaluate page, there are sight, smell, sounds, taste, touch, weather, objects, etc. And so you can look at your scene, and if you see if all these elements are empty, the answer to that question is probably no, right? If you see that, you notice going through scene by scene, you always use the smell of lilacs. Well, either that's really relevant to the story or it's repetitive. And Fictionary will pull that out and show you, look how many times I use this one smell. Yes or no, do I want to do it? You make a decision. Does every scene have a purpose? I love this one, because if it can't relate back to the main story goal in the blurb, probably not. And so here, if the answer is no, that's when you're thinking of cutting or not cutting or rewriting. And then you look at, could I put in a goal and a conflict? And maybe then it does have a purpose. Does my scene have a solid structure? So here I'll add one extra thing in here. I like to do this one with the scene name, because I usually name my scene the main action. And then there's a scene climax and a scene middle. And when you look at those 3 together, it's the same as your story arc. Is it structured in the right way to keep the reader reading? Is there enough tension? So you're looking at 2 things here. One is tension, and the other is emotional impact. And emotional impact is where you ask yourself, is this the best place, location-wise, to get the most emotion either out of the character or the reader? And if the answer is no, then you need to rewrite at a new location. Are my scenes well-paced? Then you're looking at, this is an overall structure of, is it an action, a sequel, and is the balance right? Are my scenes well researched? There's a notes tab and you keep all your research there. So you yourself will know if you've done enough research or not. Switching seamlessly between scenes. Here's where we get the 3 anchors of time, setting, and point of view. And then, is it told from the right perspective? So you're keeping track of your point of view, and do you have the right balance? And then, are my scenes consistent? And this is where you're looking at your objects, knowledge gained, etc., to make sure that you don't have any plot holes and inconsistencies as you go through. And that was a whole lot in a really short period of time.
Well done. Yes. So if you want to explore the complete novel revision course, I go through every single one of these checkpoints in great detail, and then you can apply them right in Fictionary with these story elements that are built into the app. Okay, so once again, 30% of all enrollments in the Writing Mastery Academy and Fictionary go to support NaNoWriMo. If you enroll in the Writing Mastery Academy, you get unlimited access, streaming access to all 10 writing courses, including the complete novel revision course and my Save the Cat course. We also do live webinars with experts, and you'll get access to all of our past webinars as well. We like to call it like a Netflix for writing courses because you get access to everything. And you can take everything as many times as you want and for as long as you want. And we also have a great community, which is very active. We do writing sprints and all sorts of fun events there. And Christina, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about your Fictionary.
Sure, I'll just go really quick because we're, kind of getting late in the hour here, as is normal for the two of us when we get going and talk about revising a story. But really, you can see by the structure of Fictionary, it's meant to help you keep you organized and focused. And so I won't go through all the detail, but if you have a structure and a way to keep track of it, you don't have to keep track of it in your head and lose it. You can see your story arc, your word count per scene, and then work right down onto the scene level as we've showed you today. So I hope you'll give it a try. Ask me questions from within the app. I'm always happy to answer. And then you can see if it's for you.
So we have links to both of those in the description below. Really quickly, before next week, make sure, or not next week, next workshop, the next steps are to check and revise all your scenes. You can use those checkpoints we gave you today to identify missing or underutilized elements in your scenes. Then you just revise the scenes that need those essential elements. If you've checked all the boxes already, that scene is good to go. You can join us in the NaNoWriMo Now What forum to share your progress and chat with us about your process. Okay, so their next workshop, where we're going to drill even further down into the page level revision, is on April 20th at 3:00 p.m. Pacific. That is in 4 weeks. So 4 weeks to check and revise your scenes. So yes, our next workshop, we're going to be talking about the page level revision, also called the line edit. We're going to learn how to revise your individual pages. This is the most detailed we're going to get into the revision process, where we're going to learn how to polish sentences, optimize word choice, trim unnecessary text, and get into that really nitty-gritty editing work. So I hope you will join us for that as well. And look who's back. It's great.
Whoa. Thank you so much. I learned so much, and I love the nitty-gritty editing work. So I can't wait until the next workshop. But we have some questions, and before I have ask some of the questions, I want to do a little plug from Andy Rector, who was a participant in today's webcast, and put in the comments. Don't mean to sound like a commercial, but I've subscribed to both Fictionary and Jessica's courses on Writing Mastery Academy, and I can testify they are worth the money. So there you have it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, if you can't tell already.
Yay.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I love it because when I listen to you guys, I reconceptualize what a novel actually is. It's not like one big story. It's not a novel. It's like 20 or 30 stories within that. And that's a beautiful way to think about revision. So first question comes from Dex Guy. I started to revise my first draft some time ago, and I thought I was going to be able to reduce its length a great deal, but instead it's happening the exact opposite. I have had that happen to me as well. Do you have any advice for Dex Guy?
Go for it, Jessica.
I do. I have lots of advice. As a fellow overwriter, I definitely relate. My novels tend to get longer in revision, and actually that's not completely abnormal. It's actually pretty common. And the reason for that is if you tend to underwrite your first drafts, then your revision will obviously start to expand upon things, and you will, find new plot threads you want to pull out. And so I think it's okay for your novel to get longer. However, this part in the scene level revision is actually a great part for you to really start looking at your scenes and putting them to the test. Do they pass all these checkpoints? Are they actually necessary? How much extra text are you putting in there? And we'll get into a little bit more in the page level of like really trimming down extra text. But here's where you can look at entire scenes. And can this whole scene be summed up in one paragraph in another scene? Do I really need a full scene for this? So that's something you can start asking yourself right now in this level of revision.
Perfect answer.
Great. I'll go on to the next question. This comes from Fantasy Writer BJ. who asks, for the writers who need to cut back the fluff or add some more story meat, would it be best to do that in the story level revision or scene level revision?
So I think there, unless if you have your full story arc there, your story, like, what we talked about in the last class, if your story is strong, then I would do it in this piece. And to do it in this piece, you can look for, if you've got too much, you can look at the scene level and look at the backstory elements, the flashback elements, the setting elements. So all of your senses and things, are you over describing? And you can use the elements really specifically to look at, wow, I've got a lot of backstory in this. Do I need it all? Is it showing character motivation, etc.? Or flip it around and use it the other way, where you think, wow, this scene is a bit vague, and you can then start to write it up to go, well, I don't have much description there, which is how my problem. I always have to go to that whole tab and go, okay, put some description in here. It's something I struggle with. But you can also look at, okay, my character has a goal. But what's the motivation for that goal? Okay, maybe we don't know. So maybe there needs to be more backstory in there. So add the backstory. So you can use all of the elements we've talked about to go shorter or longer, depending on what your need is.
Yeah, and I'll just add, the thing that I always ask myself is it going to change the story as a whole, or is it only going to change a scene? And the answer to that question, as you brainstorm of, what do I want to add to this? How do I want to meet up these plot points? When you think of ideas, ask yourself, will this change multiple scenes? Like, will I have to be moving things around and restructuring the story and the flow? If the answer is yes, then you should probably be doing a story level revision pass. If it's really just like meeting up some of the scenes and it's not going to change the overall story, then I would say that would be a scene level thing to do, or maybe it's a little of both.
How about we stay on, if you guys want to, we could stay on for like 2 or 3 more questions.
Oh yeah,
if
definitely.
you have time. Okay, and I can pass on the other questions to you if you want to answer them in the forums. Should
that would be great?
Would that be good? Okay. I'll ask a couple here. Let's see. This comes from Ingrid Privet. It's interesting. Would it be too confusing to use a scene template with this information during the initial draft writing phase? Do you recommend this for drafting as well?
I think that you could. There's no reason why you couldn't if you want that kind of structure. My only, I guess, word of warning would be to not overthink it. Sometimes when we have these really kind of rigid structures, we tend to overthink what we write, and it can kind of staunch the creative flow. I'm all about, as NaNoWriMo is, I'm all about just getting words, vomiting words on the page, and I worry about how they're shaping up later. But if you're the kind of person that really wants to get it out in that structured way, I don't see why you couldn't. Christina, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, the other thing that we've heard from writers is that once they go through the process once of looking at all of these things, it's in your head. And so when you write your next draft, you're already thinking entry hook, exit hook, and you're doing it. But I 100% agree with what you're saying, Jessica, is, write your story first, because that's the hardest thing. Just get that story out and down, and then you can go back and fix it up.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Let's see. Robin Wilkinson asks, would Fictionary be very helpful with a long short story? Does this apply to other lengths?
We have short story writers in there. The only thing is, with this story arc, you need about 15,000 words and 10-ish scenes, because it has to have enough meat in there to know where the inciting incident is, plot point 1, plot point 2, etc. And this in between scenes to build the story arc, but everything else works perfectly for a short story, and you can absolutely do it. And of course, up to novella, and then up to, I think our biggest novel right now is 350,000 words in one go, and I can't even editing that, but good on that author that did.
Probably named Tolstoy.
Something. I actually suggest, I think you have 3 books here. Like, find the break points and put a series out. You've written all of this. Put it in a series. You go 1, 2, 3, yeah.
Final question. Penny Geddes asks, any advice for doing this when we're in first-person narration? So does first-person narration change, or do all these rules apply?
That's a great question. I don't think it changes at all with first person. I think you still want to, it's really because it's all about reader engagement. So you still want to hook your readers, still want to leave them wanting more. You still need a purpose to every scene. You still need conflict to every scene. The thing that sometimes happens with first person narration, I will say, is we sometimes tend to kind of drift off into what I call voice solos. And this is where you get kind of voicey, and you explore the voice of your character because you're in their head speaking through them. And those tend to not be traditional scenes. They tend to kind of be like interstitials between scenes. To All the Boys I've Loved Before, actually, I talk a lot about voice interstitials or voice solos in my course. And I use To All the Boys I've Loved Before as an example because she does have some of these. And they're great. They establish the voice, they establish the character. But you want to make sure that you're not relying too much on these kind of meandering reflections of voice, and not focusing on scenes where things happen. So those are kind of the rare exceptions where you don't need the goal, you don't need the conflict. But if you have too many of those in a row, your story starts to feel like it's not going anywhere. So you just want to use that sparingly. That would be my only first person caveat.
Another excellent answer by Jen.
You guys are a great team. I need to find somebody who tells me I have excellent answers.
Grant, you do such excellent webinars.
You do have excellent answers.
How you host them and keep us happy and coming back.
Thank you
also
so
have you have excellent pep talks, Grant. You should write a book about that.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you for that suggestion. Well, thank you to everybody for joining us, and thank you guys for both guiding us and teaching us and inspiring us. So I look forward to part 4, the nitty gritty. Can't wait.
Yep.
So everybody out there, please spread the word and buy Writing Mastery Academy, sign up for it, and also Fictionary. And we'll see you in NaNoWriMo land, hopefully for Camp NaNoWriMo. You can revise your novel there.